Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this SmartView Convenience webinar. Just to explain kind of the running order for this morning, I should start by introducing myself. My name is Sarah Coleman, and I'm Product Director for SmartView Convenience. And I'm joined by my colleague Jayne Webb, who is our Insight Director at TWC. So this morning, I'm going to kick off with an overview of the SmartView Convenience service, who we're already working with, and I'm going to outline our methodology, which has allowed us to create what we believe is the most representative market read for independent convenience. Then I'm going to hand over to Jayne, who will give you an overview of the year so far in the sector. And this is using the breadth of our SmartView Convenience read to understand what's happening at a macro level in the channel. I'll then take back over, and for those of you that have time, I'll be doing a short demo of our platform so that you can see exactly how it works and what it looks like. We get really positive feedback about our platform, so I look forward to demonstrating that to you and showing you how simple it is. If you haven't got time to stay on the call, or in any case, if you'd like a one-to-one chat and demo, you can just drop me an email after the webinar and we can get something in the diary. There is a Q&A box, so if you have got any questions as we go through, do pop them in there. We'll do our best to answer during the call, but otherwise we'll reply to you directly afterwards. So the reason we created SmartView Convenience is that there has never really been a reliable and truly representative market read for independent convenience stores, which has left those working in this part of the market as something of a disadvantage. Our ambition at TWC is to be the go-to source of market intelligence for the independent convenience sector. And we're already working with numerous suppliers across a breadth of categories. Unanimously, they have reported that the data from SmartView Convenience is telling them things that they knew were happening in this part of the market, but they'd previously been unable to see this in other data sets due to the way that those samples were built and the size of those samples. Another exciting development is that we now have two wholesalers endorsing our read. Both Unitas and Booker are now subscribing to SmartView Convenience as well, using the data to benchmark their own performance against the total market, as well as inform their core ranges. This endorsement is obviously brilliant for us, but also advantageous for our supplier clients as they're working from the same data set. So to explain our universe and our sample, so essentially our methodology. So the latest ACS data from the Local Shop Report 2024, which was released just a week or so ago, shows that there are just over 50,000 convenience stores across the UK. Of those, 71% are independent, so that's around 36,000 stores. Our universe is slightly smaller than that at 30,000 stores. And the reason for that difference is that we don't include Northern Ireland, so it's a GB only read. And we've also excluded Spar as a highly managed chain. Our source data comes from a business called In Touch Group, who've essentially created a data lake which comprises EPOS sales data from around 12,000 independent convenience stores. As you'll appreciate, this is a very fragmented market, and In Touch have really done their hard yards of collating data from a number of the largest POS houses that serve the sector. And this has created the largest sample of independent convenience retail EPOS data in the industry. And from this, we have cherry-picked our sample of around 5,000 stores that is representative of that 30,000 store universe. It operates as a mini universe. So if, for instance, 10% of the 30,000 stores are Booker Premier, then so too 10% of our sample will be Booker Premier stores. This means that when we then upweight our 5,000 stores back to the 30,000, we've got a representative sample that we're then extrapolating upwards using algorithms. So how else can we be so confident that SmartView Convenience is the most representative read of independent convenience? Well, we apply a very strict selection process to the stores that we include within our cherry-pick sample. We remove any outliers, we remove stores with incomplete data or those sitting outside of our definition. We remove stores from managed chains, And importantly, we only include stores in our sample that are polling data every week over the last 2 years. And that ensures that our reporting and our sample is very stable and consistent, so that any trends that we're reporting are genuine trends and not kind of blips within the data. We then have an experienced quality team who cleanse the data to a consistent product hierarchy. We upweight our store counts using industry reports such as the ACS Local Shop Report and the Grocer Fascia Survey to ensure that our sample is representative of the 30,000 universe. And we also upweight our store counts to ensure that it's representative geographically as well. And then we apply algorithms to upweight the 5,000 sample back up to the 30,000, and these are continuously rebalanced. So what does SmartView Convenience provide? It allows you to track sector, category, subcategory, supplier, brand, down to SKU level information. We have 3 metrics: unit sales, value sales, and a measure of distribution, which we call store count. We cover all the standard industry time periods, as well as the option to create your own custom periods. You can split the data confidently by the 11 geographical regions. And we have account-specific information for the larger symbol fascias, such as Booker Premier and Londis, Nisa, Best One, Coscutter, and the Unitas fascias. And we also have a robust read of unaffiliated independents. So overall, it makes the read useful for right across the industry, for wholesalers, suppliers, field sales agencies, service providers, trade associations, and the trade press. I'm going to demo the platform at the end of the session, so do stay on if you have time. But a couple of key points to note is that the data is delivered quickly and securely via our dashboards, and any subscription includes access for an unlimited number of users. Our reporting solution is aimed at busy execs, so it's very easy to use and very visual. The data gets refreshed every 4 weeks, and that happens seamlessly. It's through a web platform, so you can access it anytime and from any device. So I'm now going to hand over to Jayne, who will give you an overview of the data from a sort of macro perspective.
Thanks, Sarah. Just take control of the presentation and see if I can move on. Okay. So I'm just going to take you through a very quick overview of what is happening in the independent convenience store channel. We've got data at the moment up to 11th of August 24, so I'm going to look at a year view and look at year to date and really drill into some of the categories and the learnings that we can get from the data. So if we look at this first chart, we have got the rolling performance on the left of the total channel. So we've got weekly data from the start of last year, looking at the value and volume percentage change year on year. Now, if we were sat here last year looking at this data and we look right to the left of that chart, you can see that value was in quite positive growth in that 4-week period, up at about 5%, and volume was just flat. Now, what we can see as the year has gone on, there has been a downward trend in those percentage changes. So you can see now we're at a point, year to date, we're looking at value down at -5% and volume down at -7%. So it's a really tough time in the channel as we see those trends, and they don't look set to be really jumping up at any time soon. You can also see the average spend line as well there, and you can see that average spend line has actually been going down over time. So actually it's fallen down, and actually average spend is going backwards when we look at that latest 4-week period. Now, this isn't because prices have been getting cheaper in the channel, because we know inflationary pressures, we know that prices of all products are going up. This is because the mix in the channel has been changing. So what we're seeing is a lot of the high ticket items, such as tobacco and BWS, they're changing. So either they're lowering pack sizes or they're dropping from the basket, which means that the overall mix of products within the channel is changing. So that is why we're seeing that average spend line going down as well. And we know very well that there is increasing pressure from the grocery multiples. So in the last 12 weeks, the grocery mults have reported value of +3%, and that's versus our value down at -7%. And the grocery mults are also reporting real increases in promotional activity. So the proportion of sales on promotion has increased year on year for the 16th month in a row, according to Kantar. So we know that this promotional pressure from the grocery sector is really escalating promotions. It's changing shopper behaviours. It's changing what they're buying in the basket within our channel. And it's really meaning that it's actually quite a challenging time within the channel. As we move on, we can then start to look at the different categories within the channel. And this chart here looks at the absolute volume change by the different categories. You can see that there's a line in the middle. So anything above the line, it shows that that category was in growth in that 4-week period. And anything below the line, you can see the categories that are in decline. And as you can see, it's quite a consistent picture over the year for most categories. So we've got pink is the tobacco. So you can see the pink decline in tobacco throughout the year. Soft drinks is the yellow, so you can see some different chunks of where soft drinks was actually overperforming and actually in volume growth, but then you can see the periods where it was in decline. And just looking at this rolling view of the data, you can actually see some real drivers of performance. You can see the Christmas period right in the middle. Within Christmas, we saw an increase in soft drinks. We saw an increase in beer and lager. So we did actually see a volume growth return over that period. So a really key time within the channel. If we overlay weather onto this chart, you can really see how some of the peaks actually correlate to warm weather. So at the start of the year, when we were looking at last year in September, it was a particularly hot September. So what we see there is an increase in soft drinks and an increase in the frozen category. We've also seen this in the most recent periods as well in August. So this August was slightly hotter than last year. So we can see soft drinks growing there and the frozen category. But then in the centre there around June and July of this year, you can see we've had a really poor summer. So when we've had this really poor summer, you can see that decline in those yellow bars. So soft drinks really takes a hit when we've had a poor summer. You can also see frozen as well, the orange bars, that's really taken a hit. Also around this time in June and July were the Euros. So that is traditionally a time that you would expect maybe beer and lager to grow, but you can see actually beer and lager in that period as well has taken a hit. So the weather will have driven that. We also saw people return to pubs in that period watching the Euros. So that will have impacted that as well there. As we drill down into the categories, what I'm trying to do now is look into category performance and realise that it's not all doom and gloom in this channel. There are different channels, different categories, different brands that are really providing some really strong volume growth. And what we can do is look into their performance and understand what they're doing and how we can actually learn from them. So I'm going to go into each category performance and actually pull out some categories that are actually doing quite well. So within license is down -6%. When we look at the breakdown of license, we see wine and spirits, tobacco and beer and lager and cider. And it's actually the tobacco category that is driving that -6 big declines. Beer, lager and cider and wine and spirits are actually overperforming the channel trends. So their declines aren't as steep as what we're seeing at the channel level. When we drill down into those categories as well, there are some real positive areas of growth as well. So, for example, in beer, lager and cider, if we look regionally, London is looking really strong at the moment. So London is looking at a +5% growth in volume. Within wines and spirits, we're seeing some really strong growth from ready to drink. We can see that as particularly in the Northeast, where brands are really in volume growth there as well. Fractionals within wine and spirits seeing really strong growth. So if we look at 5 CLs, 35 CLs and 20 CLs, there's some really strong volume growth as well there. So there are real pockets of overperformance and volume growth when you start drilling down at a category level. Impulse. So impulse categories are really the storm performers. So we are seeing year to date +2% value growth in the impulse categories. We're seeing volume declines across them, but we are seeing some quite positive value performance, which is driven by some inflationary price rises. But again, when you're looking down at the different categories within each, we do see some really strong performance from some of the categories. So within soft drinks at the moment, stimulation is in really strong volume growth, as is the water category. Crisp snacks and nuts, we're seeing really strong growth from own label within that category, really driving some good volume growth there. And within confectionery, chocolate performance is overperforming, as too is gum. Gum is a really strong category within that as well. So both seeing some overperformance in the volume trends. And seasonal confectionery. So when we're looking at chocolate performance over Easter time, we're seeing some really strong growth from the like mini eggs and Cadbury's cream eggs as well. So some really, really good pockets of growth when we look at the impulse category. Now in other, what I've done here is grouped together the grocery categories and frozen and chilled. Now, as you would expect with frozen, frozen performance is very much dependent on the weather. So what we're seeing the southern regions, so London and South East, overperforming in frozen, where we're seeing Scotland really underperforming. So it's probably down to the weather and the temperature trends. Within edible grocery, you can see overall there's a -9% volume decline. But again, when you start drilling down into the categories within edible grocery, there are some really positive pictures, especially with biscuits. Biscuits is performing well. Snack meals, such as noodles, performing well. Cooking ingredients, seasonings and rubs, and coffee within hot beverages. So all strong volume performance versus that -9% decline overall. Chilled products as well, again, a -8% volume decline when we look year to date. But drilling down into that performance, there's products such as sausage rolls, such as yogurt, that are actually showing some volume growth as well. So as you start drilling down into the performance, there might be some declines at a total level, but there are really some pockets of positivity and real growth in the channel. What I've then done is looked at the top 30 brands that have actually driven some volume growth over the year-to-date period. So all of these brands that I'm about to show have actually grown in 1 million units year-to-date. And across all of them, they've actually contributed £150 million of growth to the channel. So if we start drilling down, what we can see, that if we look at the top 10, so this is just the absolute growth that they have contributed to the channel. It's not top 10 due to size. So Red Bull and Monster are the number 1 and number 2, followed by Rubicon and Highland Springs, so more soft drinks. So out of the 4 of the top 10, we have 4 soft drinks brands. Alcohol is performing quite well with that as well. We've got Budweiser, we've got Stella, we've got Knights, and we've got AU. So 4 of the top 10 are also BWS brands. And then we've got some chocolate brands within that top 10. And it's really interesting as you start dissecting this and looking at this sort of information regionally. So when we look at Scotland, for example, there's no alcohol brands in that top 10. It is just confectionery impulse brands when we look at that. So a real difference when you start to look regionally at the data. Then as we start breaking it down, you can see the other 20 products there. There's a real mix. There's some milk brands within there. There's some crisp brands within there. There's gum. There's some spicy noodles within that top 10 as well. There's the Maggie noodles as well coming through. So a real mix of products that have actually a really mix of brands that have actually driven some really strong growth over the last year in the channel. And 1/3 of that growth is actually coming from MPD. So MPD from all of these brands, so they weren't selling any of this product last year, but they've sold it this year, accounts of 34%. So 1/3 of that volume, that incremental volume, is actually coming from MPD. So MPD is a really important part of the channel. What we've then tried to do is really look under at SKU level at these top performing brands to really try and get a grasp of what's happening and what they're doing to drive that performance. So some of the points that I'm going to put on here are real trend led. So these are they're kind of the shopper trends that we're seeing in the channel, but some are just enablers. So what we'll find is that a brand might be tapping into a few of these different trends to really grow in the channel. So there's a high stimulation trend within beverages. Now that is within soft drinks and it is also within alcohol as well. So it's either your caffeinated products or it's your stronger ABV products as well. So we can see that Red Bull was on that list, Monster within the strong ABV. We can see that Knights and Carpacki was there. So we can see that there's some really strong brands growing in that sector. There's also a real trend for spicy and sour products. Now, this partly is driven by viral trends. So if you look on TikTok, you can see quite a lot of spicy and sour challenges, but some of the products are aligned to this. But there's the Samyang spicy noodles within that. There's the Tops dip and sticks that actually appeared in our top 30. And then there's a lot of crisps products as well that are getting on this trend. So there's your Doritos Chili Heatwave, your Wheat Crunchy Spicy as well. So there is a lot of trend-led activity within the spicy and sour area. Kids and your Gen Alpha treats as well. So your younger children going into the convenience stores and buying products as well. So we see Freddo in that top 30, Milky Way Stars, the Tops dips again, Cadbury's Cream Egg also are playing there. So definitely a trend that we want to tap into. And then the enablers, when we look at what those brands are then doing, they are really driving value in value driving propositions. So what we are seeing is a lot of £1 price mark packs in that top performance. So Rubicon and Lucozade that were there have done well with this. Own brand crisps, like I said, are performing well. So they're really driving that message. So there's a lot of NPD, as I've already mentioned, just an example of the NPD that we've seen coming through in that list. And also there's quite a lot of products that kind of focus around events. So I've already mentioned seasonal chocolate, so Cadbury's mini eggs and cream eggs. But around Christmas, the Stella kegs actually performed well as well in the channel. I've just now added a couple of slides from our research. So it's not from our SmartView Convenience data, but the reason I've put them in is because it kind of backs up some of the trends that we are seeing. When we look at missions within the channels, it's not surprising that impulse categories are doing well within this category. We asked in a recent survey, what was the reason for your trip into an independent convenience store? And 50% of our sample said that they were going in to buy a quick snack to eat now. 30% said they were going in for a top-up shop. And then 26%, so 1 in 4, said they were going in to buy an emergency item. If we compare that to a grocery multi convenience store, the biggest mission there is a top-up shop. So 50% of the shoppers going into a Tesco Express or a Sainsbury's local, they're going in to top up their baskets. So you're likely to get the bigger baskets when you're looking at those stores when you compare it to an independent store. So it's definitely an opportunity if we can start tapping into some of those missions that currently under index within this channel. So these are the areas in red. So a top-up shop is where an independent under indexes. To grab lunch, so food to go, definitely an opportunity, and dinner for tonight. So that is where those grocery multi convenience stores are doing a bit more and over indexing. So an opportunity when we start looking at those, particularly if we want to start growing the basket sizes within the channel. We also asked a question in a recent survey about what they did on that last visit to that store. So if we look at that first chart, on your latest trip to an independent convenience store, what did you actually do? So if we start right at the bottom, we asked them if on that trip, would you expect to find those products cheaper in a supermarket? And actually 63% said yes, they would expect those products to be cheaper. So there is a perception that these stores are going to be more expensive. Yet then we asked if they were happy with the price that they paid, and 77% said that they were actually happy with the price that they paid. Now on the right shows that difference versus the grocery multi convenience stores, and actually are people more likely to say that in those stores or less likely? And what we can see is when we're asking about the price, happy with the price I paid, it's very similar when you're looking at a grocery multi convenience store or an independent convenience store. Now, when we get to the top few reasons, the top few items, so did you purchase a product on promotion? Did you buy more than 2 items? Did you find everything that you wanted? We're getting some quite strong percentages there, But when we look at that index versus a grocery milk convenience store, we can see that there are much higher percentages when you are looking at the multi convenience stores. So you're much more likely to buy a product on promotion if you're going in a grocery milk store, convenience store. You're much more likely to buy more products in your basket. You're much more likely to say that you find everything that you've wanted, and you're more likely to buy on impulse. So I think when we're looking at this, there is definitely a gap, in particular on around this first point on promotions. Only a third of the people said that they were buying a product on promotion versus around 50% when you're looking at grocery milk convenience stores. So there is definitely an opportunity when we look at these stores to actually try and drive some more impulse purchasing, and it's definitely a gap within the channel. And what we're starting to see when we go back to the data, that symbols and fascias are actually doing quite a good job of this and are moving along on that journey. So what we can see is if we look at the ACS store data as a start point, that symbols share versus unaffiliated independents has been growing for the last 10 years. So it's grown by 4% since 2014. But in the last year, it's grown by 2%. So there's been a big jump in the share of symbols and fascias versus unaffiliated independents in the last year. What we can also see is when we look at our data, symbols actually represent around 59% of the stores, but 66% of the volume. So if you look at the average rate of sale, so the volume per store per week sold in a symbols and fascia versus an independent store, it's 34% higher. So they are really driving more rate of sale, bigger baskets, and actually it's a real trend. If we can get behind more of these and do more of the promotions and look more at the wider ranges, tap into more emissions, this is when we can really start to grow the channel and get the bigger baskets. And you can just see some really good pictures of the perfect store and how these actually deliver and have started to exceed on tapping into these different missions, and also getting some of the retailer basics right. So bigger ranges, more promotions, more missions that they're tapping into. So you can really start to see how the symbols and fascias are actually really overperforming in this channel. So just to sum up, I started a bit with doom and gloom about how challenging and about how the channel is declining, but I really hope I've drilled in some of the strong volume behaviour and volume growth that we're seeing in the channel. We can really look at the winning retailers and what they're doing well, and we can look at the winning brands and what they're doing well, and try and take learnings from these. So value driving propositions across both. Promotions, a really key area, which I've just mentioned. We've got price smart packs, and we've got MPD also coming through when we look at those brands that are doing really well. When we look at the retailers that are doing really well too, they're really looking at private label innovation. They are winning customer loyalty. So we've seen some great activity, particularly on social media, of how some of these stores are really connecting and building relationships with their customers. They're also doing more across the different channels. So delivery services are really picking up within the winning retailers, and they're just doing the basics well. So really good at ranging, really good at merchandising, and they're really overperforming on that side of things. And this is where the fascia and symbols are actually playing a really important role within the channel. If you have any questions following this, please drop me a note and we can have a look into it further. But I'll pass back to Sarah now to give you a demo of the platform.
So as I mentioned, SmartView Convenience data essentially is access to a web platform, and I'm going to demonstrate that for you now. I'm logged in as a soft drinks user, just to give you an idea of how it would look like for a particular category, but we can offer access to essentially any category that is sold within independent convenience stores. Pricing is basically based on the size and importance of the category to total independent convenience turnover, and you can buy in at your selected level of detail. So you might choose to buy in the soft drinks example for total soft drinks, or you might choose to buy drink now or a particular subsegment like sports and energy. So you have a number of options there. When you first enter the platform, you've essentially got two choices, and that's really to meet the needs of different data users across the business. So NAM-Dash is our series of predefined reports that you can manipulate. They're ideal for a busy national account manager because they can be accessed on the go from any device, and you can filter the data as needed, take screen grabs and pop them into presentations, etc. Query Builder is our free-form query tool, which allows you to extract big data queries and manipulate them yourself within Excel. So this option tends to be more popular with insight and category teams. So I'm going to give you a quick run through of NAM-Dash because that will give you a really good idea of what data there is within the platform, and also hopefully demonstrate to you just how easy it is to use. When you first come into the platform, you've got a menu across the top, which gives you different pages that you can access, essentially as you funnel through performance. So we'll start with category, which drills down various levels of the hierarchy down to subcategory. We can look at supplier rankings, brand rankings. We can look at product performance to see our best sellers. We also have a SKU tracker that allows you to look at up to 3 products in terms of their week-on-week performance. And we also have the option of looking at performance by region and by fascia. If we start with the category page, but all the pages look pretty much the same, so it's really easy to navigate. We've got 3 measures that we can select from. So we've got value sales, retail unit sales, and store count, which is our measure of unique distribution. We've got all the standard time periods on here. If you did want to look at a different custom time period, if you use the query tool, that gives you the option to create your own. So maybe you've got a period where you did particular activity, or you want to create your own financial year, that kind of thing. That's all possible. And then there are a series of filters which will allow you to filter your selection and make any changes. So if, for instance, I change my time period to an MAT, I simply make that selection, press refresh, and immediately get my data returned. If I want to use a filter, so if we say want to drill into drink now drinks and I press refresh, that essentially takes me one layer down in the hierarchy, and we're presented with all the different subcategories of drink now drinks. So in the table here, you can see the subcategory, the share that it holds of the total, which is then presented in this donut chart on the right. You've got this year's sales versus last year's sales and the percentage change, which is then color coded to help you easily see how you're doing against that total market. You'll notice drill next to each of these, and this is just a really quick way of navigating through the data speedily. So if we're interested in understanding what's going on with this strong growth within sports and energy, then we can drill into that and go down a level in the hierarchy, and we can see the split then between stimulation, sports and glucose. If we then want to look into stimulation energy drinks, we might want to see what the brand performance looks like within that segment. And so then we can see that Red Bull and Monster are not only the biggest 2 brands, but also both in really impressive growth within the segment. If we drill again into Red Bull, then we can have a look at which SKUs are driving that growth for the brand. So we'll then going down to product level information. And we then will see that the core 250ml SKU accounts for 34% of Red Bull's stimulation sales and is in 13% growth. And then we can see the larger cans coming through with even stronger growth still. So that's one way that you can navigate through the data using the drill function. But if I go back to the category performance, you can perform a similar sort of exercise here using those filter boxes. And you can also filter any selection by a region or by a fascia. So if you want to understand what performance looks like within one of our named fascias, you can do that as well. The supplier page works in very much the same way, look and feel exactly the same. Initially, you're presented with a ranking from largest downwards in terms of suppliers of total soft drinks at this point. But again, we can refine our selection so that we can understand what that ranking would look like within Drink Now colas as an example here. And we can also, again, change those time periods, etc. The brand page looks exactly the same, going down to brand level. So again, this is total soft drinks initially. We could make a category selection. We could also choose just one supplier if we wanted to see how their specific brands are performing. So we could look here, for instance, just at Britvic brands. And if we want to remove that filter, we can just refresh again. You'll notice here that there's quite a large proportion of other within the brand ranking because we're only presenting the top 10 in this view. But what you can do with any of the pages is export the data. You can export it into a PDF or into a CSV, so out into Excel. And if you choose the CSV all option, what that will do is split out any other that has been grouped together for the report. So if I just open up the Excel page, and I'll just drag that across here to my screen so that you can see that. And then you can see that essentially I've extracted out a brand ranking for all brands across soft drinks. So all of the data is sitting behind there. It's just that for the platform itself, you've just got the top 10 there. If we go then into product performance, again, this looks exactly the same. Initially, you're presented with your top 25 best-selling SKUs across total soft drinks. You can increase the selection to show a longer list using this drop-down, or again, you could export the whole list out so that you can then take a look at that offline. Again, you can very quickly start to filter this list down to a shorter list. So you might want to have a look at a particular subcategory. You might just want to see the SKUs from one particular brand. So you could just start typing a brand and select one brand or one supplier there. This is also where our distribution measure works really well. So if I just change into store count, to explain what store count is, it's a measure of distribution. So essentially you get back the number of stores out of our universe of 30,000 stores, how many have sold at least one unit of the selected product. So essentially it has to have gone through the till. So there has to have been at least one sale, but you then get a measure of how many stores have sold each SKU. So that's just calculating for me. Again, store count can be filtered in any way, so you could limit this list to a particular category or subcategory. You could look just for your own products, and you're also able to filter these lists by one region or one fascia if you wish. So the top selling product in terms of distribution is once again Red Bull Energy 250. That's sold in 95% of stores in our universe. And you can see how that's changed year on year. Because this is ranked as bestsellers, you can see most of these products are selling in the vast majority of stores in our universe. But of course, if you start to look within a subcategory or for a particular brand, you'll start to see where there's some white space there in terms of distribution gaps to fill. If I just return back to value sales again, you'll then be returned back with your top sellers list. And as I mentioned, if you, for instance, wanted to see, well, what does this look like for Scotland and for London, you can make that selection. Or equally, you can see what your top sellers list looks like for one of the fascias that we split out. If I just copy that text there, I can quickly demonstrate how SKU Tracker works. This allows you to look at up to 3 products. So you start to make a selection and then you can go through the menu, or what I've done there is just essentially pasted my product of interest from the previous page. And what we then get by return is week by week volume sales and distribution for this particular SKU. And in the table beneath, you can also see value sales and rate of sale for that product. So it gives us a really quick view of how our product's performing week by week, particularly useful if you've got NPD, or if perhaps you've got a pack change and you want to see old going out and new coming in. The final two pages in NamDash are our region and fascia performance page. So as I showed you just now, you can filter any of the pages by an individual region. But if you want to compare how the regions are performing one against one another, then you can turn to the region page. So here we've got sales of total soft drinks in the latest 4 weeks. It's been a really good 4 weeks for soft drinks, total sales up 9.4%, but you can see how that varies across the different regions of GB. And you can also see here the share that each region accounts for of total soft drinks. And of course, you could then look to see how your brand looks like in comparison by just making that selection there. The fascia performance page works in a similar way to the region page, but in this case, we're looking to see how the different fascias are performing against the total market. So as a reminder of the fascias that we split out within independent convenience, we've got independent here, which is the unaffiliated independent retailers. So they're accounting for around 1/3 of sales. We've then got Booker Premier and Londis. We have the Unitas fascias, which have been grouped together there. We have Best One and Cost Cutter from Bestway, and we have Nisa. All other symbol stores are then grouped together in other. So that's an amalgam of all the smaller symbol fascias in this part of the market. And again, you can manipulate this selection as you wish. So you could look at a category, you could look at your brand, total supplier, etc., etc. So that's essentially how NamDash works. As I mentioned, we also have a query tool, which allows you to pick from the same measures. You can select from a number of different time periods. And as I mentioned, you also have the option to create your own custom time periods. You can also extract weekly data from Query Builder as well. And then you can make a selection in terms of which fields you want to extract. So by clicking on a field, you can select that field, but you can also filter what you want to include in your data selection as well. So perhaps we just want to look at drink now drinks, and maybe we just want to look at colas. So then everything that gets returned will just be within that part of the market. And then we can select the fields that we want to see and run that query. Any queries we've previously run will sit within our query history, which enables us to then rerun them when the data has refreshed. That's essentially the platform and how it looks. As I mentioned, if you're interested in seeing the platform for your own category and you'd like to have a conversation about access for your business and costs, etc., then the easiest thing to do is just to drop me an email, and we can organise a Teams call where I can do a less whizzy version of this and take a bit of time to look at your category and have a discussion about how this data might help you and your business. So do just drop me a note if you would like to do that. And also, if you've got any follow-up questions, then do feel free to send a message, and I will get back to you with any queries that you might have. That's really everything that we were hoping to cover today, pretty much bang on time. So thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much.